In 2026, two actors walked the same red carpet for the same billion-dollar film. One was reportedly paid $20 million, the other, $8 million. The gap between Tom Holland and Zendaya is not a negotiation mistake. It is the output of a contract architecture that has been operating since the 1930s. And to understand how it works, we need to look at the first deal each of them signed. The reported figures for Spider-Man Brand New Day place Tom Holland's compensation in the range of $20 to $25 million. Zendaya's reported pay for the same film falls between $5 and $8 million. They shared the same global promotional cycle, the same press tour, and the same premiere night in Los Angeles. They appeared together on the same magazine covers, in the same trailer shots, and in the same interview rounds. The gap isn't marginal. At its widest, it approaches 3 to 1. To understand what that ratio actually means inside the studio, consider what the film itself earned. The numbers list Brand New Day at approximately $1.69 billion worldwide, against a production budget of around $225 million. Its opening weekend alone reached roughly $360 million, which at the time marked one of the biggest domestic openings in box office history. Rolling Out reported that the film edged past the record previously held by Avengers Endgame. In India, the Times of India noted that the film crossed roughly 400 crore rupees within its first 8 days, placing it among the top 5 biggest opening weeks in the country. When a single weekend's gross approaches $500 million, an 8-figure salary makes sense on the balance sheet. But the internal split is what matters here, because underneath the headline numbers sits a mechanism that most coverage ignores. This isn't a story about who is more famous on social media, or who has the bigger Q score, or whose face sells more merchandise. It's about how the same corporate apparatus priced two actors differently for the same product, under the same roof, in the same year. The question isn't whether $8 million is a large paycheck. It's whether the system that assigned that number would have assigned a different one if the actor in question had been a white male lead from the start. By 2026, Forbes had pegged Zendaya's combined slate of releases at approaching $2 billion in worldwide grosses. Rolling Out noted that by mid-2026, combined box office from Brand New Day and The Odyssey, both starring Holland and Zendaya, had crossed roughly $1.8 billion. She had proven that her presence alone could anchor a blockbuster across multiple genres. Yet inside the Spider-Man franchise, her reported compensation remained at most 2/5 of Holland's. That isn't a reflection of market demand. It shows how the franchise's contract architecture allocates value and who it decides is irreplaceable. To see how that allocation works, we need to go back to where both contracts began. Tom Holland's reported Spider-Man arc started with a $250,000 cameo in Captain America: Civil War. For Spider-Man: Homecoming, his base salary reportedly sat at $500,000, with total earnings rising to approximately $1.5 million once box office bonuses kicked in. By Spider-Man: Far From Home, reports from outlets like Comic Basics and The Direct put him at around $4 million. For No Way Home, the number climbed to roughly $10 million. And for Brand New Day, industry coverage settles on $20 to $25 million, with some reports widening the band to as much as $30 million when bonuses get factored in. Zendaya's reported starting point was different. For Homecoming, where she appeared as MJ with limited screen time, fan discourse and entertainment outlets have passed around a figure of roughly $300,000. The exact number has never been confirmed by a trade publication like Variety or The Hollywood Reporter, so it stays a reported estimate. But the directional picture is clear. Holland entered the franchise as the lead, and his pay climbed accordingly. Zendaya entered as a supporting love interest, and the studio set her anchor point lower. Here's where the quote system comes in. In Hollywood, an actor's most recent confirmed salary turns into the baseline for their next negotiation. It's not a conspiracy, it's a spreadsheet. Whoever starts lower stays structurally behind, because every subsequent deal references the one before it. The quote system doesn't care about talent or box office contribution. It cares about the last number printed on a contract. And because Holland's number kept climbing while Zendaya's reportedly climbed more slowly, the gap between them widened with every sequel. But the quote system is only the first layer. The second layer is where the real lock happens. Layered on top of that sit multi-picture option clauses, which Marvel is well known for using. These lock actors into preset escalating rates across sequels before their bargaining power has time to peak. The studio knows that by film 3, the audience has bought into the actor's face, so the option period locks in the rate while the actor is still replaceable. And the quote system ensures the next deal never jumps too far from the last one. Someone who starts at $250,000 gets to $20 million in predictable steps. Someone who starts at $300,000 gets to $8 million in smaller ones. Then there's back-end participation. In franchise films, the top-billed name typically lands a share of box office bonuses or profit participation. The co-lead often doesn't. And you have the most favored nations clause, a contractual guarantee that certain cast members won't get paid less than a specific co-star. If MJ's contract never included one of these, that alone could explain a meaningful portion of the gap. These count as standard industry practices, widely reported in sources like Ben Fritz's The Big Picture, not confirmed facts about Zendaya's specific terms. But they're the mechanics that typically govern how these deals work. To see what back-end participation actually looks like when it goes wrong, consider Scarlett Johansson's dispute with Disney over Black Widow. Court filings revealed that she had a guaranteed $20 million fee, but alleged losses of up to $50 million because the film's hybrid streaming and theatrical release depressed the box office receipts that should have triggered her additional earnings. That is the scale of back-end, and that is what a co-lead can miss when the back-end structure isn't built for them. What you get is a structure where the leads pay compounds and the co-leads pay increments. Holland's trajectory from $250,000 to $20 million took less than a decade. Zendaya's reported arc, from roughly $300,000 to $8 million, progressed across the same span, but without the same acceleration. The gap didn't open in 2026. It got built into the first deal, and the quote system made sure it never closed. But this architecture isn't new. It has been operating for decades, and the cases that exposed it live in court records and studio archives. In 1936, Bette Davis refused to keep working under a restrictive Warner Brothers contract that locked her into poor scripts and low pay. She had already won an Oscar, but the studio's option clause allowed them to unilaterally extend her deal and assign her to films she didn't want to make. Davis fled to England to try to void the deal. A British court ordered her to pay Warner Brothers $80,000 in restitution, plus the studio's legal fees for filing the injunction. She lost the legal battle, but the case became a landmark in the fight against the studio option system, the direct ancestor of today's quote system. Davis's revolt marked the first real crack in that wall, but the wall itself wouldn't fall until Olivia de Havilland's lawsuit in 1944. A few years later, in 1939, Hattie McDaniel became the first Black performer to win an Academy Award for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. Her reported salary for the film ranged from approximately $450 to $700 per week. By contrast, Vivien Leigh reportedly earned around $25,000 for the same production, and Clark Gable roughly $120,000. McDaniel earned a fraction of her white co-stars, and at the Academy Awards ceremony where she won, they forced her to sit at a segregated table in the rear of the Coconut Grove Ballroom, apart from the colleagues whose names shared the same screen. Powerful executives had to beg for her entry into the room, and the gap between recognition and pay would only grow wider. Then there is Dorothy Dandridge. In 1955, after becoming the first Black woman nominated for the Best Actress Oscar for Carmen Jones, she signed a 3-picture deal with 20th Century Fox, starting at $75,000 a film. Studio head Daryl F. Zanuck personally pushed for the contract. That counted as historic for a Black actress at the time, but the prestige didn't convert into leading role access. She rejected lesser roles that then went to other actresses, including Rita Moreno. Her opportunities narrowed rather than expanded. By 1963, she performed in nightclubs to pay off debts from lawsuits. She filed for bankruptcy that year, and she died in 1965. The parallel isn't that these women were cheated in a single room by a single producer. It's that the contract architecture itself decided who got to catch up and who didn't. Recognition and even real pay figures didn't guarantee proportional opportunity when the system got stacked from the first deal. Davis lost her case, but shifted the legal landscape. McDaniel won the industry's highest honor while earning a fraction of her co-stars and segregated from them at the very ceremony where she won. Dandridge broke the nomination barrier and still died bankrupt. The machine doesn't break. It simply prints a smaller number for whoever walks through the door second. Which brings us to the part that doesn't fit the pattern. In February 2023, the Los Angeles Times reported that Zendaya had renegotiated her HBO deal for Euphoria Season 3 to approximately $1 million per episode. She also holds an executive producer credit on the series and a producer credit on Challengers. These aren't honorary titles. They represent real negotiating power, and they prove that, when the deal structure allows it, Zendaya can command compensation that rivals or exceeds many of her male peers. The LA Times noted that the deal reflected her status as both star and producer, which put her in the upper echelon of television salaries. So the real question isn't whether she can win a negotiation. She already has. The question is, why that same power hasn't shown up in her biggest franchise? The answer is simpler than most people expect. It's timing. Her Spider-Man rate was locked in years before Euphoria made her a proven producer-level negotiator. Television deals renegotiate season by season. Film franchises lock rates across multiple pictures before bargaining power peaks. By the time Zendaya had the Emmys, the Golden Globes, and the $1 million per episode quote, her Spider-Man option rates had already been set in stone. Here's the critical distinction. TV and film don't operate on the same timeline. In television, an actor's value gets reassessed every season. A network knows that if they lowball the star of their biggest show, another platform will poach them, so the deal gets reopened. In a male-led superhero franchise, the co-lead's value often freezes at the level of their first appearance, and the quote system makes sure it thaws slowly, if it thaws at all. The Euphoria deal isn't an exception that disproves the rule. It's proof that the rule only applies where the contract architecture allows it. That's why the $8 million figure is so telling. It's not small. It's simply not large enough to close a gap that got engineered into the first contract and reinforced by every option clause that followed. The fact that Zendaya could command $1 million per episode on HBO, but reportedly not parody on Spider-Man, tells us everything about where the industry allows women of color to exercise power and where it doesn't. So the question isn't whether the system can be beaten. The question is, which contracts allow it? The $20 million versus $8 million gap isn't about one actor being shortchanged in one room by one studio. It's about how the contract architecture itself decides who gets to catch up and who doesn't. White male leads get treated as irreplaceable franchise anchors. Women of color get treated as substitutable, even when the box office proves otherwise. The quote system, the option clause, and the backend gatekeeping aren't bugs in the software. They're features that have been running since the 1930s, and they reproduce the same hierarchy decade after decade. The cumulative Spider-Man franchise under Holland has likely surpassed $4.5 billion in global box office, not counting merchandise, streaming, and licensing. In that context, paying Holland $20 million and Zendaya $8 million is a rational cost of doing business. But rationality doesn't mean fairness. It means the system has optimized for a particular outcome. And that outcome is a hierarchy where the white male lead functions as the franchise's engine, and the woman of color gets treated as a replaceable part, no matter how many billions she helps generate. Once Zendaya had earned the cultural and commercial capital to demand parity, the franchise deal had already closed its window. That's not a failure of negotiation. It's the machine working exactly as designed. And the design dates back to the studio era. That's the price of the franchise. The architecture doesn't break. It simply assigns a different number to whoever walks through the door first. And it has been doing so since the 1930s. If you want to see how this same machine operated against Bette Davis, Dorothy Dandridge, and the stars of the studio era, the playlist is below. Subscribe for more archival investigations.